So, hi, Dave.
Hi, Michael.
Thanks for coming today. Would you do the obligatory where you were born, where you were, and your birth date?
I'm Dave Hall. I was born in Seattle, Washington in April 22nd, 1947.
And when did you come to Jerome, Dave?
Well, about 2 months later, according to my mother's story, they moved to California shortly after my birth, and then they were going to go back and bring the young child back to see their grandparents in Kansas, and they came through Jerome. And it was our first trip through, and my mother often told us the story about coming around the curve up there and finding Jerome out in the middle of the desert here, and so I don't remember much from that particular
Yeah, you were like
visit,
2 or 3 or something?
No, I was 2 months old.
2 months old, oh wow.
Yeah. So we came back through here several times because the parents still lived in Kansas and we still lived in California, and this was a direct route, so we'd come through Jerome. I remember one time when I was very young coming through here, it must have been early 50s, and I just have this vague memory. I believe it was Jerome because we were winding around and it seemed like we were on a mountain, and then there was the street lights, and there was a lot of fellows on the street corners like smoking cigarettes and fedoras and stuff. And this must have been in the early 50s, maybe perhaps before the mines actually closed, because it seemed like that we were going through an actual city more than a ghost town.
So it was pretty busy, even then.
It seemed like it was bustling, and like I say, I think I was about 3 years old, so this recollection could be totally of some other place, I don't know. But that's kind of, on the same trips I remember we'd go across the Navajo Res when it was all dirt roads and all. You know, I remember going through some of the Hopi villages during the dances, and as we crawled through there. And
Oh, wow.
hitchhiking Indians riding with us various places out there as we went across this country in that time.
Your parents had a fascination for Arizona? They knew about Jerome?
Well, no, they were coming. This was a direct route. They broke down in Siloam. They had to have the car rebuilt, so they were there for about a week, and then they went on to Congress, up to Yarnell, across old 89A. It was, you know, there weren't near as many roads back. This is 1947.
17 didn't
there
exist.
There weren't hardly any people in Arizona.
Right.
So it was a different place.
Cool. So you got the Jerome air in your lungs pretty early.
I did. I was fascinated. I remember coming through in '56. We took a trip all cross country and back, and it started out through Jerome and up Oak Creek Canyon. And I remember we stopped in the afternoon. That's when the fella had the burro rides up there across from the Spirit Room in the parking lot there, the old Prospector. And most of the shops weren't open. They just had mannequins, homemade mannequins in the windows playing cards and drinking whiskey and stuff. And it was probably it was 1956. So it was 3 years after the mines had closed. And the town was rather depressed. It was like a Rust Belt industrial town that had been abandoned, you know, basically. Yeah. Although there was still a core of citizens here through the whole thing.
Right. I don't know, rumor has it the story is there were 20 people left or something. You think it might have been
there's a lot of controversy over that. I know I often heard the number 90 or 100, and then in Diane Rappaport's recent book, she claimed there was always at least 300 and some people here, and that's about what was here when I arrived finally in 1970.
Huh. So where did you come from in 1970?
Well, I come through Jerome several other times, and one time I spent a couple of nights in the Methodist church here with a Methodist youth camp, and it was December, and the town was like covered with a coat of snow, and it was totally abandoned. I mean, it was just like ghost city practically. I mean, there were no tourists at that time coming through in the winter, and it was, you know, just kind of a surreal fog and snow, and so that just added to my fascination for the place. I remember telling my high school counselor, I came in my junior year, you know, you got to get ready for college, and so what do you want to be when you grow up, you know? And I said, well, you know, I'd kind of like to be an artist and live in Jerome. And he said, well, that's nice, but what else would you like to do? So anyway, and then I went to college in Flagstaff, and after working up there through my degree and doing art and being introduced to ceramics and pottery in the art department up there, I graduated and decided to come down here and live.
So the place held what do you think was the fascination even through your younger years as a kid and a teenager, and what was it about it?
Well, it was just on the side of a mountain, the view, in 1956, I remember watching, I think it was probably Robert Sandoval, a young guy about my age, young Mexican kid, walked down to Mexican town there on those stairs that used to be open on this far side of the new state. And it just seemed like, I just thought to myself, this would be a cool place to be a kid, you know.
Yeah.
And just explore this place. And the history, of course, is always fascinating. And in the early days, a lot of it was still just laying on the ground, a lot of relics and all kinds of stuff. And places where these homes were full of furniture and things, some of them newspapers on the kitchen tables and stuff. And it was just fascinating, you know.
Wow.
Here's this industrial abandoned city out there on the side of a hill in this spectacular environment.
So many of them were unlocked. You could just walk in and...
Some of it.
Yeah.
And then there was a lot of vandalism. A lot of people were breaking in, and once it was broken in, other people would come in, and people did. There was a lot of problems with people that lived here, with people breaking in and taking their stuff, thinking nobody lived here anymore.
Scavenging, right.
Because, you know, to survive, the Historical Society was formed. They bought property uptown to preserve it from the salvage companies, and then it opened it up. They started promoting it. How are we going to get tourists here? So we'll promote it as the world's largest ghost city. And they had spooks, and they put these things in the windows. They had some ghosts in the windows too, and they had the sign shop down there where the Mine Cafe is, and the Mooey Christmas shops. They had a sign shop, and they had routers, and they made these signs that they put all over. There's still a few of them around. The fire department's got one inside the fire bays there, Jerome Volunteer Fire Department.
Yeah, I've seen them. Jerry Voynick showed me an old bumper sticker that they made that they'd pay a kid a nickel to go out and stick it on a tourist car or something.
They scrambled. Laura Williams was one of the real stalwarts of the community at the time. She was the secretary for the mining company, and one of the main trustees at the Methodist Church. She was the head of the Eastern Star. She wrote the news column for the Verde Independent on the Jerome News. She was secretary of the Historical Society, and she ruled that thing. And she had a reputation as kind of mean and gruff, but she really had a good heart. And she was one of those founders. Doug Kell was another one that I knew that was one of the beginning people in that. The Peckriches that lived in this neighborhood, Doc and Phil and those folks.
Yeah, this is a Peckrich house, my house here.
Was this Phil's, or was this one of the other guys?
I think Phil.
Yeah.
I think Phil.
Yeah.
And then his sons who live in Prescott, a lawyer,
right.
They ended up having it afterwards. But so you literally graduated from college and moved here directly?
Well, no, I thought I'd be a ski bum. A friend of mine, we graduated a mid-semester to avoid the Vietnam War. We didn't apply for graduation in '69 when we could have graduated, and took an extra semester to stay under the radar of the
don't blame me.
The selective service.
Yes. And
so that was a big thing. I mean, I went to college in 1965. At height, the Vietnam War was just ramping up, and we had to stay in school or we were gone. And several of my friends went, my brother included, and some of them died over there. And a lot of them are dead now from what they experienced over there, what they were exposed to, and what it did to their minds. So we tried to avoid that as much as we could. And
Can't say I blame you. I was
I went to a lecture where the guy said, if you're about to graduate, don't apply, because that's immediate notification. Just let it slide.
right.
And they did find us about October, and then finally, I think it was about November, they pulled the lottery, and I pulled a big number, so I skated. So I was lucky,
Yeah,
fortunate.
I had a number myself in '73 when I graduated high school.
Yeah.
And I put it off too, and once I finally did it, I had a pretty low number. But that was the year where they pulled the plug on it.
Yeah, they
And
could.
I was very relieved.
Yeah. Yes. But anyway, that was going on at that time. So I got out of school at mid-semester, and I'd finished up. So I could go teach. I had the credential to teach secondary level art, and I got the student teaching and everything. And that added semester, I thought I'd get some career possible by taking that and staying out of the service at the same time. So then.
So that was ceramics, correct?
Well, it was art. I got a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in painting from Northern Arizona University
Okay.
in 1970.
All right.
Well, like I said, I could have got teaching, so I put it out. A couple of recruiters came to the school at that time. But at that time, hardly anybody graduated at mid-semester. Everybody graduated in June. They didn't even have a ceremony in the middle of the year. So there wasn't much recruiting going on. But LA junior high and Washington, D.C. junior high were looking for inner city teachers. And that didn't appeal to me any more than Vietnam, really. And so I thought I'd become a ski bum. So a friend of mine, we went up to Vail. We ended up in Vail after traveling around Colorado, but I didn't really ski very well, so that didn't work out for me. I hitchhiked home finally. At that point, I just said, what the heck am I going to do? Well, I've always wanted to be an artist in Jerome now. I got a little withholding coming back from the government. I just got the check. I could live a few months on that, and I had been selling a little artwork in Flagstaff and other places to make a little extra money. So I came in.
Paintings?
Mostly drawings, but also some painting, a little bit of pottery.
Okay.
But I came to Jerome. It was February. It was kind of a nice sunny, one of those warm, sunny, probably 60-degree, nice days that we get in February. And I wandered all the streets of Jerome looking for some place I could live, And I come up on East Avenue. Everybody on this street had a dog on the porch, a big dog. And they were all barking, This doesn't look like a real friendly neighborhood, These couple old Slavic ladies looked out at me, suspiciously. But then I went to the Laddish house, and they had a sign saying apartment for rent. So I knocked on the door, and Nikki was there. Nikki Laddish, who was the bus driver for the elementary school and the janitor down there. And he and his mother and his sister lived there. And so they said, well, they showed it to me, and they said, well, what do you want for it? And they said, well, this is $35 a month. It's 5 rooms, and you got your utilities included on that. So I said, well, I can, I got this money, and I can afford that for a few months. So yeah, I moved in there, and Mama Laddish came down with strudel and borscht and stuff that night, and she could barely speak English. She'd come here off the boat from Yugoslavia when she was 18, back in the 19-teens, before the First World War, through the,
Wow.
I think, or at some time about that time, and Nick and his sister were both not married, and she worked at the school. The high school was still out here where the buildings are still, but now that's the art center and a lot of shops and things. So,
So $35 a month.
Yeah.
And you had how many rooms?
I had 5 rooms.
5.
I had a pottery room, I had a painting room, I had a living
nice.
room, I had a kitchen, I had a bedroom,
Very cool.
Very nice living conditions. But I didn't know anybody. and so I was pretty much a hermit during that time, but it gave me time to do artwork and try to make pottery without the advantage of having a stocked studio like you do at college, which they teach you how to make pottery under those conditions, but when you're out and you got to make it yourself and you don't have anything, then you got to figure it out. No kiln. Nicky got interested in it, and he helped me try to build some little kilns out in his yard, and I found that the dirt in Jerome is actually clay, and that I could process it and add some things to it and make a clay. So I was learning how, you had to learn how to make, where to get your material, how to fire it, what kind of glazes. So I never did really get it down. I got a few little pots while I lived there, but nothing really.
So you used the caliche right here on East Avenue?
Well, no, I developed that a little later actually, but I just stumbling around, just prowling the hills of Jerome. I was a hermit, and I was spending a lot of time in the afternoon. I'd go for a long walk out, and I noticed that when the ground got wet, it was clay. So then that began the process of trying to figure out how to mix that in with other things and use it as an actual pottery clay.
Wow.
That's what I've done.
Have you continued with that process?
And we still are doing the same.
No kidding.
Main Jerome pottery. We'll get into that, I guess.
Okay.
We'll get through. That's a whole nother story, really.
All right, fair enough.
But at this point, I lived over there for about 4 months, and then the money began to run out. And so I thought, I had met Ed Dowling down in the Gulch, and I was telling him my predicament, and he said, well, I got this goat barn. We can run the goats out of there. It's this time of year, it's summer, and put a roof on it, and you can live in there. So I said, okay, that sounds like a deal. And so we scrounged some old tin around on the hillsides here and tacked it up on the roof, spent a day doing that. And then these friends of mine from Flagstaff, ladies that I knew from the art department up there, Karen and Christy McConville, they had been child actors and stars on the Loretta Young show as these twins, regular thing. And so they were ski bunnies, and they were beautiful, and they decided they had worked with Mr. Wiseman, that Gale and Wiseman owned the Powder Box Church, and they made an arrangement to have a gallery in the top floor of the Powder Box Church.
George Wiseman.
And they had all this art that people had consigned to them, and they wanted a guy to live with them. So it was like, goat barn, beautiful ladies uptown, and it was no real.
Didn't have to think about that very long.
Didn't think about it long. Yeah, that's right. So I moved up there, and this is where I got my first guitar, actually, because Ed had tried to rebuild an old classical guitar and this was before Ed Dowling is now a master guitar builder and repairer, but at that time he was just trying to figure out what to do. So he tried to put steel strings on a classical, and he warped the head way up, but he gave me the guitar and said, here, for doing the rope, you can have this. And so that was my first guitar. I put nylon on. I got the neck down a little bit, so the action was only about this much.
So you ended up learning guitar?
I learned guitar.
Playing with Ed too?
Well, we didn't play too much, but yeah, that was where I had been playing a little ukulele. I had a ukulele when I was in college, so
okay.
I kind of started playing that. So that's the story of how I got my first guitar.
Can I interject a question here? You said you were running out of money, so I guess there were no part-time jobs, or you weren't interested here in Jerome. You wanted to make it as an artist, so you were going to.
I wasn't going to get a job in the area. I don't think I wasn't. I wanted to continue doing art. I'm not sure. There weren't really very many jobs, not in Jerome that I knew about. I did, I was willing to do some work if somebody needed something done, and I think I did a little bit of that, and I also was still selling art. But then I just, living with those two girls it started getting kind of weird, because it's just, it's just crazy. So finally I kind of got burnt out and just decided to limp home and go back up. My folks lived in Page, Arizona at that time, up on Lake Powell. I'd spent my summers up there working as a lifeguard to make money to go to college. So I worked my way through college up there, but they were still living there. So I moved up there and I got a little job there, a temporary month job, and then moved up to Flagstaff, where I lived for a while and met some folks that had a shed behind their house where I could make pottery. So I started making pottery up, and I finally got the hang of how to make a kiln and I finally got a product. And then I ran, at that time, I was probably 72 or something, after we got back from trying to be a ski bum. And then we moved to, but it's hard to remember all this stuff. This was like 50 years ago, so it's
I understand.
some of it's a little mumbo jumbo, but yeah, I went up to Flagstaff and lived there through the summer. It was great, but coming fall again, I was pressed for money, so I thought I'd go up to. A friend told me about a potter that had a job in Albuquerque, so I went over there, but the job wasn't there, so I ended up with a friend in Boulder, Colorado, and got a job working pipeline company up there, tying in gas wells out in the plains, in a place called Fort Lupton, out by east and north of Boulder.
Oh, wow.
And so I worked there for three months with those guys and made enough money that I had a little grub stake finally, because it was 6-7 days a week. It was sun up to sundown, so there was lots of overtime involved, and it was construction work at the time. So we made some money, and I thought I had enough to buy a property. So I came back to Jerome and decided I was going to buy a property. So I looked around. There's the Berg de Cleve up here, which is the blue house on Main Street now. That was a brown house, and it had a for sale sign on it. Earl de Berg was a Phoenix resident, and he had the Behavior Research Company, which was an early polling company. He did polling for political and also, and he and his friend Bruce Babbitt had bought property up here. Actually, the house that I lived in with the girls was Bruce Babbitt's house up here.
No kidding.
And he and his friend Earl bought these two properties, and they were going to be bohemians and live in Jerome after they got out of college. But then they went on to,
Yes.
be governor of Arizona and
Right.
president of this company down there. And so they were ready to sell out their property up here. They had given up on the bohemian idea, I think. But
That's hilarious.
when I showed up at his house down there, the lady who was showing it told me how to contact him. I went down there and talked to him, and I was the guy he wanted to have the place. He wanted a bohemian kind of person coming in there. I guess living his imaginary life or something. Maybe.
Did you have long hair at the time?
No, I was pretty straight. I'd been working on construction, and I really wasn't identifying myself as a hippie at that time.
Okay.
But he would have been okay with that too. He was, he just wanted somebody, an artist. He said, that's who I wanted to have, is somebody that was an artist. So he gave me good terms on it. He gave me, it was $5,500, and then nothing down and $80 a month.
Unbelievable.
6%. So I got into that deal, and it turned out pretty well.
Yeah, now that's the blue house just before...
before the curve, before you get to the Ghost City Inn there.
Okay.
And so I moved in there in February of 1972.
You still own it?
No, we sold that. But I've been there in 70, and then I'd been away, took Flagstaff and Page and Colorado, and then came back and bought that property. And it had a nice little basement where I set up my artwork, and I had sheds in the back where I started the pottery. I built kilns there, and started making pots and selling some artwork. Fern Goldman was here at the time. She had the Downhill Trading Company, and she had been on my route when I lived in Flagstaff, where I'd drop off some pottery and some drawings with her, and she'd have some checks for me when I come back around in a few weeks. And
Anywhere in Jerome?
she was right
You
there.
sold?
She is where the what is in there right now? Oh, Roberto and Annie's building on Main Street. It was
yeah.
the Speakeasy restaurant at one time, but in the early years, in the 70s, it was the Downhill Trading Company. It was Fern Goldman's, and she was like the heart of Jerome. She was knew everybody, very friendly, very open. She used to have potlucks down at her house, and she was encouraging and right there in the neighborhood. And
Now she's Fern, who was with Gary
Yeah.
Shapiro? Okay.
Yeah.
Just tying some pieces together. I'm sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt.
no problem. But anyway, she was like a special presence in Jerome, and there were only like Ed Dowling and Kurt Pfeffer and maybe a couple other folks were in the Gulch when I was first here in 1970. But by the time I got back in '72, a lot more young folks had moved into town. A lot of shaggy folks and.
You remember who? Richard Martin, that kind of that group?
Who was here at that time? Well, Ed was still here. Benny and Val was a couple in the Gulch. Dee Dee Shamel was down there. She's an artist that lives in Cornville now. Richard came, I think, about that time, maybe the following year.
So it felt like there was a scene starting to happen.
Yeah, there were more, noticeably more. I'm sorry, I can't. Some of them have moved away. A lot of them, their names have been forgotten. But that was the time, and there was some resistance in the community then at that time with the old timers. They didn't know what to make of all of these young folks, and there was some tension, but. It was mostly just a few people that were really upset about it, I think.
Okay.
But there was there was the hippies and the old timer thing going on, and
Right.
I had I was working there at that property on Main Street in my little workshops, and a couple of young fellows that had been pottery students over in Prescott, Mike Newman and John Kennedy, had decided they'd like to have an antique and pottery store in Jerome, and John's father had bought or had leased from the Historical Society I guess he bought the property where the Arizona Discoveries is. He started that Arizona Discovery business. Prior to that, there'd been a fire in that back in 1970. And he came in and he cleaned it up and rebuilt it and put that shop in there at that time. And his son was a student at Prescott and with this other fellow, Mike, and they negotiated with the Historical Society with Laura and got a lease on the Sullivan Building, the 4-story building with a clock on Main Street. That's now the clothing store. It was Designs on You. Now it's Threads, I think.
Right. Yeah.
So they leased that and the adjacent lot, which at the time was the pay it and take it lot. It's now the Mexican restaurant.
Vacaros or something.
But at that time it didn't have any front or roof, or it was just the lintel across the front and the wall on the one side.
Oh, no kidding.
It was just an enclosed thing. We put our big catenary kiln out there, and Mike and John put in some electrical wiring. They put a front on the building because it was just pieces of tin that had been nailed up on the front. So they built this little front, and some of it was still there, I guess. But they rebuilt it, glassed it, put in a door, and we strung parachutes on the ceiling because it was a wide open 4-story building. It was just a shell. It was like a bomb had gone off there. It was like after the World War II or something. But anyway, it was $25 a month for both lots, if we, as is. So it wasn't too expensive.
Hey, you're on Main Street. You got traffic.
It was down on the low end. There's hardly any traffic. All the traffic was way up on the other end at that time. But it was still on Main Street. And problem was those guys had just taken a couple pottery courses over in Prescott. They really didn't know how to make pottery. And I had kind of worked it out, so I started working with them. And we built the kiln, and we came up with a process. Part of it was the clay, but using the local clay. And we became Made in Jerome Pottery.
Still to this day.
1972. May
Wow.
of 1972 it opened. So we've been in business over 46 years now.
That's impressive.
And those fellas, well, like one week, that first winter, I think we made $10 total sales. And so, of course, all we could do with that was go up and get a few pictures at the Spirit Room. So that's what we did.
Now, were there
soon
other...
after John took off, he decided I wasn't going to make it, so he left.
Yeah, $10 for a year is pretty brutal.
No, that's a week.
Oh, that's a week.
Week's take. No.
Still pretty tough.
It is hard, even at $25 a month.
Yeah.
Rent.
There's a shortage.
But
Well,
that's
Were there other businesses starting to pop up on Main Street at that time?
yeah. There was something going on at the Flatiron. Roger Holt had a studio in the Flatiron district there. I think the one that Knapp's have now, perhaps.
Oh, okay.
And Scott, Paul Scott, an old Arizona character, long gray hair, long beard, had an antique store there in the Copper Star building. So there were some businesses down on that end. The Boyd was a ruin, just like but soon after was restored to a usable extent by the Historical Society, and then those shops opened, those 3 shops in the Boyd. And there'd always been down around the Turquoise Spiders, it was Scotty's Rock Shop that, I forget what the lady's name, Stickles, Dorothy Stickles had that store. She, all these folks were like just typical Jerome folks, just cranky a little bit and a little edge to them. And
A little eccentric.
just, get them on a bad day, they chew your head off. But they were all had good hearts, and it was a fun community, really. And they were pretty much open. Most of these folks, like Paul especially, he really liked the young hippie ladies. He always had them over, and invited them.
Was there a sense of trying to get the town back on its feet, trying to attract attention, and any sort of group attitude about that, or just kind of?
Well, there would always been, like the Historic Society tried to promote it as a tourist.
The
ghost town thing, and there was, I think
was there
the individual hippies. Now, we weren't really into like forming a chamber of commerce or anything, but we had a lot of ambitions. We had a lot of energy, and we were, we wanted to do something, and also the community itself was just struggling. I mean, it's prosperous now, but back then there was a group called the Community Service Organization. It was, I don't know that it was ever formally organized, but it was at least a bank account that got money to support the infrastructure in the community. And they're the ones that started the home tour. That was their fundraiser that they developed. And they make enough money to do some minor repairs on the infrastructure, on the sewers, or maybe give a little bit to the fire department if they needed a battery for the fire truck or something like that. And so the town just limped along on a shoestring forever. I mean, it'd been doing this since the mines closed, and
Right.
that's kind of the way it did. So we all just kind of pitched in. One of the things, of course, was the fires. This town's burned down many times, and back in the 70s, we used to have buildings burn up, you know, and
Oh, no
sometimes 2 or 3 at a time, because
Really? Did you
the
have?
fire department consisted of the 2 antique trucks, the 27 Dodge, or the 28 Dodge and the 37 Dodge fire trucks, and the infrastructure hadn't been improved. It was, the hydrant system was not regulated. The lower hydrants had plus 300 pounds, 340 pounds on the lowest hydrants. Dangerous pressures that can kill people.
Yeah.
And the hose was rotten and the pipe was rotten. And the trucks didn't always start. And they had a system, you'd call for the fire department, it would ring at the fire chief's house, and there was a phone on the side of Paul and Jerry's. And when that phone rang, the siren would go off. That siren used to work, that's over on the police station, which used to be, at that time, was the fire station, and the one also on Hotel Jerome would go off to let somebody know to answer that phone. And then you'd go across the street, and there's a button at the fire station where you push the button to activate the sirens, and you get the sirens going, and then everybody show up. And we had 4 sets of petrified turnout gear. Just coats and boots is all we had. We didn't have pants. There was no air equipment. There was no radios. It was a little scary. You know? And at about that same time, in '72, like the whole Kingman Fire Department responded to a railroad fire. It was a large propane tanker that they were offloading, and it caught fire below it, the unloading gas, and it impinged the tank. And as they were setting up to fight that fire, it levied what they call a boiling liquid expanding vapor explosion. And so it killed the entire fire department of Kingman at that time. So that was kind of in your head like. But also at that time, then the state decided they better start training the rural folks, so that there was a big gear up to. So we got wrapped up in that, and got some improvements. Started getting some free equipment from, because I had joined the fire department in 1972. I had a fellow that lived down here and worked in the high school, John O'Donnell, was the secretary, and he, you know, it was basically if you were young and strong, it was like,
they wanted you.
You better do your part. And one of the things we got to do is not burn down. So that was, a lot of us stepped up and
Did you
joined.
get training at the very beginning?
At the beginning, very little. I mean, it was just like about a half an hour. Here's how you attach the hydrant, then you run the hose, and you attach the nozzle, and then you put the wet stuff on the red stuff. Okay.
And pointed at the
and we had fires back then. We actually had fires back then. So
no kidding.
Anyway, it was a little scary, but it gradually improved. I joined in '72. I worked my way up. Got to be a captain of a truck and training officer and assistant chief, and finally in 1981 I became fire chief and served till 2001. So I had 20 years.
You were fire chief when I moved to town. Yeah.
And so that was one thing that I was able to contribute. It was we made a lot of improvements during that time. Actually, Phil Tovery had been chief before me, and he had spearheaded a lot of the upgrading and modernization as well. So over the years, just to show you what kind of money we were operating on that time. When my first year as fire chief, I was given a budget of $10,000 to run the fire department, but only $5,000 of it was actually available to spend when I'd go in to get purchase orders. So we ran the fire department that year on $5,000. But we kept the fire. We kept the town from burning down over that time, and it's.
Ever lose anybody?
We never had a fatality in a residential fire in Jerome. We had a few fatalities. We gradually. I mean, we took over the emergency medical at some point, so we had a lot of fatalities at that point, of course.
Right. No, I meant people on the fire department, the volunteers.
Got hurt.
Yeah.
And actual fires. I mean, no, we really didn't have any serious injuries. We had a few, things happen.
Sure.
And but yeah, no, we were lucky. We were safe, and that was one of the things I'm proud of that I've contributed to this community was that service, and it was a good experience. And but I'm glad I don't do it anymore. It's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
To go to bed every night and you're basically responsible for the lives and property of everybody in town, plus anybody coming through.
It's a little bit of a weight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we had, like, when we first started, one of the fire chiefs from, he was active in I think he was president of the State Fire Chiefs Association. After that explosion and the state state fire marshals involving and educating I went to a class down there. One of the other members of the class was this guy, Bob Weber, and he came up to me at first intermission, and after we'd introduced him, said, "You're Dave Hall from Jerome. Hey, you guys ought to every day at noon when that whistle goes off, all you guys in town, all you firemen ought to go uptown, pull down your pants, and everybody in town ought to come up and kiss your ass." And then I had another guy who was a chief down in Phoenix that later became the chief of Fort Worth, Harold McMillan. He did a class up here with us, and he said, "Dave, you've got the least resources and the worst hazards of any fire department I've ever seen."
That makes sense.
So, it was a big deal.
It was a challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, we had some fires, and out here we had Ashley Hostetter. Was an artist in town, kind of a Western artist, and he had one of the houses over here, the bell houses, like we called them at the time.
Mm-hmm.
The one that Bobby rebuilt was actually it was almost totally destroyed in a fire late one night, early in my fire career, and the whole thing was like a comedy of errors. It was just hydrants didn't work, pumps got stuck and we couldn't prime them. Everything. One of the people had to jump out and broke an ankle when we should have got a ladder to him. Then the ammunition started going off. And we all
From inside the house?
Yeah. So
Oh my
we all
God.
hid under the hill. Actually, I guess it isn't much of a hazard, but it's scary enough. So we all hid down on that side of the hill until that stopped, and then we saved the dogs in the basement and the motorcycles, and then some of the other fire departments came, Cottonwood and Clarkdale, and helped us string a long string of hose down to a far off hydrant, and we finally got a little water on it.
Oh my God, that was a pretty long lasting
All
fire.
night,
Huh?
yeah, it lasted all night.
Wow.
So that was kind of a wake up that we needed to, really get on the ball.
Yeah. What was I going to ask you? I lost it. Well, let's scoot back to, you had just, I know you had that, your studio before the current building, you were next to Knapp, but what we were
Right.
talking about was something before that one.
Yeah, see, we were in the Sullivan building.
Yeah, the Sullivan building, which is
That
the one
was-
that Richard redid,
That's
right?
Richard bought that building.
And it was
That's a long
open.
story.
It was open.
Well, we had done some work on it. The Historical Society had done some work on it. Actually, George Glassman and I, we were going to be shut down when they got a study on it. The building was in really bad shape, but the engineer said we needed to put plywood on the floors to stabilize the thing, to give it some shear. So George and I did that on the upper stories. We put down plywood, and it took us several weeks to do that.
Wow.
And they did some roof work, and they put, the Historic Society was doing a little work on the building at the time. I think they did some roof work, and they put a downspout on the side of the building, and some gradual improvements on it. But yeah, we were there 17 years. It was pretty rough the whole time. We had a wood stove that we heated it with in the winter. This is a 25 by 50 open masonry place, and this was back when we used to get snow in Jerome and cold weather, and it was rough. But we were in our early 20s,
You were
so
hardy.
we were able to handle it. But today I wouldn't. Yeah, I would no way. My arthritis would never.
Right.
Never put up with it. But finally we put a kiln in the back, and that heated it up on the days that we fired. So
Yeah.
although it wasn't really all that safe, but we were able to not burn the building down. And
So you were developing your style, your pottery style at that point?
Well,
figuring that out?
yeah, I had, like I said, I had gotten really caught up. I don't know. I meet pottery students, and there's a lot of enthusiasm a lot of times, you know. Just the clay, just the whole process. Certain people just respond to it, you know, and I guess I was one of those folks. I was like, yeah, this feels great. I'm a potter, you know.
Yeah.
And I liked that, and I liked the rhythm of the work. I liked the, you know, after working in painting and drawing, I still did a little bit of that, but I was focusing more and more on pottery, and I worked a little bit with my friend Mary Margaret Klein over in Sedona. She has had Sedona pottery since before Made in Jerome. And she had apprenticed with some potters, production potters in Michael Leach, Michael Cardew, Bernard Leach and Michael Cardew tradition of the revival of stoneware in England. Leach had actually gone to Japan and learned stoneware pottery there, and brought it back to England, and started a movement there. And out of that movement, my friend Mary Margaret studied with a person that had studied. So I kind of learned that tradition of production kind of that English production pottery model from her, and I kind of liked that. It was centered on just efficient production, just making simple forms, utilitarian vessels that would be pleasant to make and pleasant for people to use, and that kind of became my focus on it, was just creating something that was pleasant and kind of just a basic little thing, not great art, more craft really, but it's sort of been my life work, and I've produced in the 50 years I've made pottery, probably quite a few pots, you know, thousands and thousands. I haven't counted, you know, but I'm sure at times Made in Jerome was probably producing 300 pieces a week, you know. When I had people working, we had like, one time I think we had 5 hippies all working in there at once, you know.
No kidding. So you sold here in town, but in other locations around
A
the state?
little bit of wholesale over the years. We never really got into crafts fairs or anything, but we were able to sell what we can make. We've always been able to sell. If we can make it, we've sold it. I mean, the stuff I've got left is just the stuff I made in the last few months, you know.
That's where you want to be. Wow.
We found, like, we had to find that price point where, like, when we started out, we had, our ceramic mugs were $3, you know, and we just kept making them, and pretty soon we had these lockers that we'd gotten down in the smelter in Clarkdale, and we started filling those lockers up with like mugs, you know, because they weren't selling at $3. So we said, let's make them $1. So then we just sold them all, you know. So you find that price point. I mean, and it's you know, you're not trying to make a whole lot of money. You can go to volume, and now I'm on the total opposite end. My mugs are like $39, $36, because I'm worn out after 50 years of mixing clay and
Pumping 300 a week.
yeah, and driving foot-driven potter's wheels and loading heavy kilns into the shelves into the kiln and that kind of thing. It's I've kind of worn out, but I still enjoy the work. So I'm doing the work at the pace I enjoy doing it, which
Sure.
is a lot less than I was. But I'm still pretty productive. I still come up with a few hundred pots every month that I make,
Wow.
and put them
So,
out there.
well, obviously the town was starting to pick up business-wise. You guys survived. You had enough traffic coming through town. This was, we're back at what, 73, 74, 75, somewhere?
Yeah,
in there?
it just over the years it's just gotten a little better. You
Yeah.
know, it used to be the winter time. Sometimes there'd be maybe half a dozen tourist cars in town, you know, on a winter day, or not even that. If it's snowing, nobody in town at all.
Right.
So the thing was, it didn't cost much to be alive, and that's why we were able to do it.
Right.
And we kept our costs down. We didn't buy new cars. We didn't
Yeah.
go on long, expensive trips or go out to eat all the time.
Yeah.
We just could get by on a few bucks.
What'd you do socially? Did you say earlier that you were kind of a little bit of a recluse?
Well, when I
were
first
you-
moved here, I didn't know anybody, and I'm kind of tend to be shy and reclusive anyway. And I enjoy being a hermit in a way, privacy and all. So I just kept to myself pretty much. But like I said, I met Ed, and I met Kurt Pfeffer, another guy I knew. Ron Fredericks was living in the Gulch at that time. But then when I came back, I got Fern. Fern would have parties. I'd go to those. There'd be music. A guy named Mose McCormick was here at the time. He was on the lam for a bank job in Hawaii.
I think Ed told me a little bit
And
about that.
he was like the soundtrack at that time. He and another guy, Michael Fry, who was Mary Fry was another person here. Her sister was here. They used to play in the spirit room a lot, or at the potlucks. Every full moon there'd be a potluck. Fern, you know, and there'd be music and a lot of vegetarian food and
At that,
the whole marijuana smoke wafting in the air.
right. Well, who were your friends? Your close friends, I guess.
Well, my associates at the shop, I'm Michael and John.
Michael Butcher?
No, this is Michael Newman was the fellow that started the, Michael Newman and John Kennedy.
Those are the two Flagstaff guys?
They were from Prescott, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know, we were all just friends with each other. So of course, Fern, Gary, Ed. My first wife I met at that time, Debbie, and her sister Suzanne was here. A group of ladies moved here from Florida.
They got shipped in like they used to do in the old days?
No, these were lesbian ladies.
Oh,
And
okay.
they had come here and they liked it here, and they were beautiful, long-legged, blonde ladies. I kind of thought of them as the Amazons.
But unavailable.
Unavailable, but nice, you know. And we all got along. And, you know, prior to that, back in I think it was in the '60s, a group of gay men had moved into Jerome.
George Glassman, I mean, George will smack me for saying that. George Wiseman.
George Wiseman was one.
Yeah.
George Latka that had the stained arts shop. He was another one. There's a guy, Michael Lynch, that lived down. There was a Ben and Frank Ebert, who became mayor of the town. His partner Ben lived here with him for a while. He actually worked with us as a salesman. He was a retired door salesman. He worked with us.
Right.
So there was that community. There was Ted Darling that worked for Dempsey at the House of Joy. And so those guys had come here just, you know, as a refuge from probably prosecution, or not prosecution, but persecution.
Yeah.
In California at that time. I mean, it was a whole different ballgame as far as being of another sexual orientation. You
Yeah.
know?
Well, yeah.
And
You could,
so that was a aspect of Jerome. You know, that
Right.
it had this outed gay
Yeah.
and
It was,
lesbian
it was safe.
presence
It was
here.
safe
It was
here.
safe here. It was,
Yeah.
I think, and prior to that, during the 50s, like Roger Holt was here. There was an artist colony developed in the 50s and 60s in Jerome prior to my coming here, but I was aware of it when I'd come through, and it was part of the attraction, I think, because I'd always kind of, as an art student and all, I'd been kind of, connected with the beatniks and the other bohemian movements of the time, and that seemed to be what this town was, kind of had that quality, that you find maybe in Greenwich Village or
Right.
Haight-Ashbury at a certain point, or, just a certain different kind of counterculture view of the world, not buying the whole thing that everybody else was doing
Yeah.
in the suburbs.
Yeah, how do you feel about, do you feel it's just an echo, the way it is today? Do you still feel that vibe around?
I do. I think
Yeah.
it's still here. I think it's changed. It's changed a lot, Things have changed a
Of course.
whole lot.
Yeah,
One of the big things in my mind is just there's so many more people.
coming
Yeah.
through.
Having grown up in Arizona and been through here all the time when I was young, there was like 1/25 the people in
Yeah.
this landscape. So
Yeah.
it was a whole different, it was a very different kind of wide open, that's how I remember it, just kind of,
Quiet.
more peaceful, a lot less traffic through here. And Jerome was, there was Winifred Foster and Shorty Powell, and a bunch of them would set up a movie screen and watch movies down on Hull Avenue in the summer evenings because there was no traffic. My dog Spot and her friend, the bloodhound, would lay out in the middle of the road. This was before leash law. All night long, they just lay out in the middle of the road and sleep because there's so little traffic coming through town.
Amazing.
Where were we?
Let's pick up again. I think the main trunk of the story is you had your business in the Sullivan Building.
Right, we ran the Sullivan Building. We, like I said, we used to be pretty open to whatever came along, and people would come along that wanted to make some pots and work in clay. So
You'd hire them.
we'd give them commission on any sales they could make. So
Okay.
to start them off, and so they were anxious to make sales. But yeah, we paid them. We paid a little bit. I don't know. The whole thing was pretty much a hippie enterprise at that point.
Very loose, huh?
Wasn't real well organized. I don't think we were withholding anything or any of that kind of stuff.
Right.
But we were paying taxes. I was paying taxes. I did tell the IRS I didn't want to pay the Social Security because I thought it was not going to be any by the time I was 65. So
Right.
thanks you, but no thanks. And they sent me a letter about a year and a half later saying, you owe us $357, something like that, which was a huge amount of money at the time. So
Yeah.
now I'm glad I stayed with
I-
it.
I
Social
bet.
Security, I get a nice check every month.
Me too. So were you partners with anybody?
Well, we were
at that
partners.
point?
We were partners. Michael was in there. Like I said, John left after in the first winter when we weren't making any money at all, and then Mike stuck around. But he was young and he was restless, and he was finally ready to leave. So I bought him out. We negotiated a deal, and I bought him out of the business. And then I've had it as a sole proprietorship ever since.
Right.
Now, Jane Moore is almost a partner. She's a partner in the sense that she's actually runs the business at this point. She's more in charge of it than I am, just because of her take charge personality or whatever. And she's willing to do it, and I'm getting less and less. So I'm still own the building, but I'd say she's in charge.
Yeah. When did she get involved?
Well, she moved to town shortly after we did. I think the next summer, maybe after I moved here in '72. So maybe in '72. And she and her husband, Dave Moore, who's a chiropractor, bought Paul Scott's Copper Star building across the street. And Jane ran the antique store, and David got his chiropractic office going in the place next door.
There was a chiropractor in town. Boy,
Yeah.
we could use that today.
Well, he's in Clarkdale now, but I think he had a stroke, and I don't know if he's still in business. David Moore, a good friend of mine, one of the original. He was one of my very good friends at the very beginning, he and Jane. But Jane was an artist. She was painting and drawing and had always been an artist. She'd gone to art school in Chicago. And so she started coming over just to diddle around in the clay and play around, and did little sculptures with the clay, and made these little sculptures of mostly animals doing human activities and stuff like that. So, and then she started actually working there, I think, when she divorced Dave. They split up sometime in the late 70s, and that's when Jane started working full time over there.
And that was still at the Sullivan building?
That was still at the Sullivan, yeah.
Okay.
We were over there, like I said, 17 years in the Sullivan building.
Oh, wow. Now, when did Richard buy the building? Did he have it at the
Well, it's an
beginning?
interesting story. But yeah, I was going to buy the building. Myself and Phil Tovery were going to buy it, and we almost bought it. And then the deal fell through at the last minute.
And who
then
owned it?
The Historical Society owned it. And then they pulled out of the deal. And so we didn't get it, but that was probably just as well, because it probably would have been tough. But anyway, Phil owned he bought the Copper Star from Dave Moore across the street. And so we moved over there.
And that's where now?
He gave us, it's the part that's abandoned now, the very end piece. That's the Copper Star building. It was the old Cantina de Minero. It was the Mexican bar. I got a story about that. Nicky Ladich, when he'd get out of school when he was a kid, when he was in grade school, he'd run like hell to right across from the Copper Star. And it was at the time that the shifts would change. And that was the Mexican bar. So the miners that have been in there since the last 8 hours, were in there still, and they were drunk on their ass, and they had the place filled up. So then the new shift would come in, there'd be a brawl, they'd throw all the drunk guys out on the street, and then they'd take over until the next shift showed up.
The same routine just went
And
kept going.
Nicky,
turning
that was
over.
great entertainment for Nicky as a child. But anyway, so we moved over to that building. Phil rented that to us because Richard initially was going to have us in the building, and then it turned out he married Lee, and she decided she wanted to be in there. So we moved across the street to the Copper Star, and had that for 9 years, through the 90s pretty much.
Yeah, I think you were there when I moved to town in '94.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was pretty much all from 90 to 98 or something like that. And then we were having a little trouble. Phil was a difficult landlord in some ways, and so we wanted to go somewhere else. And at that time, I had served on a committee. This was through the fire department that was trying to straighten out the ownership of Main Street property, because it was multiple entities claimed various lots up there. The town hall was in question, whether it was Phelps Dodge or the town. The lot behind it there was in question. Everything all the way to the end of the block where my kiln is.
Yeah.
All of that was kind of in dispute, especially the lot across from the spirit room. All three entities thought that was theirs. And so we formed this committee. We kind of negotiated an agreement. Everybody signed off on quitclaim deeds. the town got this current side of the fire station, which on the other side of that curve, which was Phelps Dodge's. And then Phelps Dodge got everything, and then the town got the park and the town hall. And then Phelps Dodge at that time, wanted to divest their in-town holdings. And so they decided to put it up for auction.
And when was this?
This was about 20 years ago, I'd say.
Okay, so
that'd be
still
about
in the 90s.
98.
This was,
We were still at the Copper Star.
oh, wow.
Probably even earlier than that. So they divided it into 3 parcels. There was the parcel where the horseshoes and the parking is. There was a bathroom up there on that upper parking lot that's now Eric's parking lot.
Okay, right.
That was a small piece in the middle, and then the rest of it from Grapes Restaurant to the end of the block was Phelps Dodge, or it was this other parcel, and it was theirs. And so they put the whole thing up in 3 parcels at an auction. They had put up a tent in the park. My wife Susan and I were anxious to get out of the current place, so we went to the auction. We looked at it beforehand and sort of figured out how high we could go on the auction with all our. If we maxed every credit card and came up with every cent we could, how much of a earnest deposit could we come up with and make a deal. And so we got to the thing, and we figured a price of about $85,000 we could go to. And then my wife at the time was on a medication, was making her a little wired up, and she got carried away in the auction. We went to $126,000. We didn't know how we were going to pay that. I told the auctioneer, don't cash this check right away. Give us about a week. And he said, okay. And so we scrounged together some partners, got some cash together, and I got Jeannie Welsh and Curtis Linder and Sherry McMahon. The 3 of us got the property, but then what had happened, see, that this fellow that owned an oil refinery and had a lot of money, he had this vision. He had hired Lee Christensen to draw up this development on that property, on the whole thing. He was going to rebuild the Miller building, the 5-story company store right on Main Street, right on that lot where... Recreate that, and then Lee designed some old-time-looking buildings at the very end, and it was a nice-looking plan, and for some reason, this millionaire let my wife outbid him on that centerpiece that just blew his whole thing. So that never happened because of my wife, Susan. And a lot of people are grateful for that, because they say that Miller building used to cast a dark shadow on Main Street all winter long.
I can imagine, yeah.
And it was going to be a parking garage. He was going to put a parking garage in there.
Oh, Lord.
And then they'll do commercial development on the bottom floor and then do these other commercial ones. It was quite a project. So anyway, for some reason, he lost. He didn't match her bid at that number, and so we got it. But then we traded that piece that we got with this other guy who had a partner who also was in the oil business. I think he had gas stations all over the state. They were going to partner up on this thing, and so his wife wanted to have a shop in Jerome. At the time, the fire station was in the building that's the Grapes Restaurant now.
Right.
That was the fire station.
Yes, I remember.
And so she wanted that building to have her shop. So she put a shop in there, but then she found out she didn't really want to have a shop, and so they were able to sell that. Well, they were able to sell that to Eric with the lot that we had originally gotten, because we traded off for the lot we have now from the whole building where Papillon made in Jerome. That building sits on that lot now. And
Wow. Whoa.
Eric got the middle piece, and the town finally negotiated the parking and the thing. So that all, and of course we built the fire station on the other side.
I had no idea that happened so late in the game, so to speak.
Yeah, a lot of this, Jerome property, the boundaries and the ownership on some of it was very tenuous.
Sketchy. Well, were you involved? Let's head back to when you were over at Phil Chovery's building. Were you? What were you doing with the fire department at that time? And were you involved in town government at all?
Just as fire chief. I never was in the council. I was involved in the fire department. I was fire chief at the time we were at the Copper Star all the way until we moved into the other building. Actually, I was still fire chief. So I served for 20 years. We were initially so during that time, the business moved around.
You went through some mayors.
Quite a few mayors. I can't even remember all of them. A lot of politics went on. We built that fire station. That was quite a political process to get the town to do that. And that's one of the things that I feel is a personal accomplishment in a way, because I kind of ramrodded that thing through from
Now, Lee did the design on that, right?
Lee did it. I worked with Lee on the design. We got community development block grants at the time. The whole community was poor enough that the whole community-wide projects qualified, but we did have to go out at one point and canvass the town to make sure it was still on that level. And we got some other grants, and we also did some fundraising. We did big fundraising events, probably raised about $30,000 or more in donations and selling T-shirts and stuff. So that was
cool.
Actually, in 1972 or 3, when that push came from the state fire marshal's office to start training and getting rural departments kind of upgraded, they had come up and done a survey, and they set out a list of things the town could do, and one of them was put a fire station on that particular site. They identified that as the best place to put a fire station. So it's kind of interesting that we were able to do it 20 years later, actually put it together.
You can go either way, to Prescott or through town without going on that hairpin turn with a big truck. Seems like a good spot.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
And head out to the mine too.
Yeah, no, it's a fine place for it, and it's nice. There was a lot of feeling in the town, from its past, its poverty consciousness, that we can't do that. No, we can't.
Right.
There was a lot of fear. I had to do some real battles. I had one council, the final council I had to deal with. Three of the 5 members were against the project. They didn't want it to happen.
No kidding.
And so.
What were their reasons? You figure
they just didn't take it. Well,
that poverty mindset.
Yeah, they just didn't take it. It was foolhardy. Jerome can't have a big fire station like that. We're Jerome. We need to build a little metal shed out there where nobody sees it. It's like, look, this town's burned down numerous times. Its biggest nemesis is fire. And we're also providing medical service to the ever-expanding population of people coming through here. Let's show that we support this. Let's show that we're proud of our community. Let's build something we're proud of. And that'll serve us for a long time. And so it was, I had to make some passionate speeches, and we get all the firemen to show up at the meetings, and then somebody would blink, someone of the consortium that wanted to put an end to this foolishness would blink, let it continue, and finally it happened.
Well, congratulations. Good job. It's a beautiful building. And,
it is, and they did a great job. We got several awards for that building. We went to a thing. The governor at the time, Jane Hall, gave us the statewide government infrastructure award for the year.
Oh, cool!
And we also got an award from CDGB, the Community Development Block Grant folks, as the best project for the year for their awards. Right. So we were, you know, it's a feather in our cap as a community, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's go back. Where are we when you're at
Well,
Phil Tover's? What years
well,
are those?
well, we started in about 1990 to
Yeah.
99 maybe, or.
And you met your wife here in Jerome?
My first wife I met through John Kennedy, one of my original partners. He was friends with a couple of ladies, and Deborah Etkin was her name. Her sister had come with a group from Florida that we talked about, and then she moved out here. She wasn't of the same persuasion, and she needed a place to live, so I had this place, and she moved in, and one thing and another, you know. We finally got married, and we had a child, and my son Nathan is 40 years old now.
Holy cow.
And he lives in Tucson. And then it went south. You know, there's a lot of tension. There was tension around money, and there was a new child. You probably have maybe had some experience with that. It puts tension on a relationship, and it just, I guess we weren't really that compatible anyway. We just kind of fell in together. So we split up, and it was fairly amicable. I mean, we had we didn't fight it out in court or anything. We just made an agreement. We had a joint custody of the child, and things have worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
We're still friends.
Did she stay in town for a while?
She's in Rimrock now. She moved to Sedona and then
Okay.
Rimrock,
Okay.
and still is in the area. Works in Cottonwood. But then I met Susan Cloud. They call her Cloud. It wasn't her actual hippie name. It was actually her actual name, Cloud. But she was known as Cloud. She was this kind of interesting young woman that I at first noticed, I think, walking down to my store when I was in the Sullivan building. She walked by and gave me this big old smile. And I smiled back and I walked away. Who was that? And I look back and she's looking back at me and smiles again. So just like looking back at me, looking back at you, looking back at me kind of thing.
The lightning bolt.
And there was something there. That's like, you know, if you believe in soulmates or whatever, there was some connection there anyway. She was she was flamboyant lady. She was a actress and she produced plays. She produced several plays up here in the what's now the archives or the Jerome Center there, but that was a theater originally. That when they redid that was a beautiful theater where they used to put on plays and music and stuff.
Where the Historical Society is?
Office, where the office is, the old Episcopal Church.
Yeah, they have a wonderful stage there.
Yeah, she put on Neil's, what is it, Fool for Love. She produced a play there, and she did a Tennessee Williams. She'd get local folks to act, and she got some really good plays. She had a lot of talent. She was a writer. She wrote plays, and she had lots of friends. We were married 35 years. We're together 35 years. Married pretty much the whole time, and had 2 children, Lissa Hall and Casey, and they both went to school in the area, and now Lissa's in Phoenix and Casey's in Albuquerque.
Oh, and how old are they?
Casey's 29, I think. He's the youngest, and Lissa's in her 30s. I have a hard time. I could calculate it, but it's something like that, 35.
So your
30,
first
right.
wife and kid, you must have got married shortly after you moved to town?
Fairly soon afterwards, yeah. She
Okay.
moved in with me that first summer after I moved in the winter, and then we got married a year or so later, I think.
Okay.
And then we had the child. We were together 7 years.
And
in
then-
a little house on Main Street. And then,
And your second wife,
she was Susan Cloud Hall,
right?
and she died
Oh.
3.5 years ago. She woke up one night, said, I got the worst headache I ever had in my life. And so the next day, you want to go to the ER? No, I don't want to go to the ER. By that evening, she was almost delirious, and then by the time we got her to the ER, well, she had a brain infection, a ventriculitis or whatever they call it. It's in her ventricles, which is the area in the brain that produces the cerebral fluid that flows all through your
Right.
brain and into your, and so they got her down to Barrows Institute, and they chased that infection around her brain for about 5 weeks, and then she was suffering, and progress wasn't being made. So we put her in hospice for 3 weeks, and I was with her in Phoenix at the hospice for 3 weeks, and she died.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I wasn't aware of that. I'm sorry I stumbled into that one. I didn't.
No, it's just what happened,
Right.
We had a beautiful relationship, but she suffered from physical and also emotional things. She had some really traumatic things happen to her over her lifetime, and I guess it was, what happened, and
Right.
it's we're all gonna die, so
Yes, we are.
it's gonna happen. My mother died about the same age as she did, 62, I think, and so did her mother. So,
Yeah.
that's one thing. As you get older, your friends start
Yes.
dropping by the wayside, and the important people in your life.
That's
I mean, we
been
can.
happening a lot around here lately.
It is, and my what I learned through that is just why I'm feeling that sorrow is because I experienced so much joy from the relationship.
Yeah.
You wouldn't feel that unless you really got some real joy out of it. It's just the other side of joy. If you're going to outlive that person, then that sorrow, that's the debt you owe. But it doesn't really hurt if you just feel it and breathe it in and let it go. It's okay, You can deal with it. It seems like, friends of mine, how could you deal with that? Well, you just deal with it, like anything else that comes up in your life.
Right.
But if you keep the right attitude, it helps. I think if you get all distraught and feel like you're a victim and poor me in the whole situation, I think it's better to focus on what a blessing it was to have that in my life for the time. I got 35 years of wonderful marriage, and I'm a lucky guy.
There
It's
you
too
go.
bad she had to leave, and there's a hole in my soul. I don't have the companionship and the affection,
Right.
and I crave that a little bit still. And if it comes along, great. If it doesn't, well, I got my share anyway.
Like you said,
So that's
most
just
of us
to throw that out there. That's a little
No.
off subject, but that's
Not at all.
that's a profound thing that happened in my life for
Yes.
sure.
Absolutely. Really, you got to figure most of us, compared to a lot of other people, we're really, even with those tragedies and sufferings, we're really pretty lucky overall.
Oh yeah, I
Yeah.
feel really, really lucky.
Yeah.
I've had so much luck in my life, I can't hardly believe it.
Yeah.
To be where I am. I came to Jerome with a pickup truck and a bed and a couple pots and pans and some towels and change of clothes in the back, and
Pretty much me too. Yeah.
and now I own a real estate empire. I've had all these wonderful experiences.
Right. Right.
How did that happen? For a potter who was making $10 a week. Well, I just go to work every day, spin a few more pots, maybe be fire chief for a while.
So when you were married to Cloud, were you at that what's now the Blue House?
This was a similar story. She needed a place to live. We were kind of involved with each other. She was married at the time, actually, to my friend Michael Rodriguez, who's supposed to be in town this weekend, and I'm looking forward to seeing him. They were on the skids. She had left him in Santa Fe, where she was living with him, because he was, whatever. They weren't getting along, and so she came over, and she needed a place to stay, so she moved in with me, and then we had a really passionate, romantic thing getting together, and so we got pregnant, so then we got married
Yes.
a few years later,
Okay.
and had our beautiful daughter, Lysistrata, which is named for the Greek play Lysistrata, where the women revolt and won't have sex with their men if they don't make peace with the Athenians.
Steering the course of history.
So that's that whole drama
Yeah.
of things. So anyway,
Well, it just occurred to me to ask you, any memorable, just crazy stories of stuff that went on in Jerome during this whole time? Just like people doing wild stuff. Maybe you have some recollections about the drug bust or any sort of things of that nature. Oh, there goes the siren.
Is it? Oh yeah, there's tons of stories, you know.
Some of your favorites? I can't believe that happened.
Oh boy. Let me have a nut or two. Maybe it'll come to me. Blanking out here for some reason, but
Something will bubble up. Well, one thing I always ask my interviewees is if you had the opportunity to speak to the town of Jerome 50 years from now, what would you want to tell them about
how it is.
being a citizen of Jerome, what it means to you, and what perhaps hopefully it'll mean to them. Does that make sense? Maybe
Yeah, well, I think what's important here, one of the real qualities that we have is just our sense of community. A lot of that comes from just the size of our community, being small. A lot of us know one another, and that's a real special thing. Now, in 50 years, whether the town will still be that small, we don't know where it's going to be. It's unknowable, and wherever it is, it's just evolved into what it needed to be, whether it's still here as a thriving tourist mecca or it's all slid down to Clarkdale, who knows? But if it's still here, just know that this town's got a rich history going way back, and the hippies and the resurgence and the art community and the bohemian qualities were all part of what it was when I was here. And we were able to maintain that to some extent, but still it changed dramatically, and it will continue to do so.
Yeah. Well, it seems like Jerome has been able to resist catastrophic gentrification. Unlike, say, Sedona or other communities I've lived in, it seems to, there's something to love about the cranky old council people that just say no to everything. There's an advantage to that in a way, in that it kind of slows down. Because I always worry about the young, like you, when you first came to town, the upstart artists, got nothing, just ready to throw it down and do something, and it's getting a little harder.
Oh yeah, no, I don't know how you could do it. If you're a Trustafarian or something, or you can do it.
Right.
But if you have nothing, how would you do that now? I don't know. You get an apartment for $600 a month.
Yeah.
Without an income,
quite work.
You're not going to live there very long.
Even when I came here, I would rent rooms from Jared or Jenny up on the boardwalk, and and I even had a place at the schoolhouse up there. I had a studio, and I think I paid $150 a month.
Yeah. Well, it's.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I just wanted to let you know that it stopped.
It stopped?
Clap again.
Okay. Did you start it back up?
Yep.
Okay. Thanks, Sonny.
No problem.
All right.
So anyway, where were we? Let's see.
We're still going there? Okay, excuse me, Dave.
Yep.
Yeah, every once in a while I'll walk over and just make sure it's running.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. What were we telling? Yeah, it's.
The character of the town and maintaining it.
I personally, I was fortunate enough 25 years ago. are we? You want to hear the story of Shippey?
Yeah.
Well, many years ago, the Jerome Historical Society negotiated on behalf of a group called the Jerome Historic Restoration Commission or something of that effect, with Phelps Dodge to lease the homes on Company Hill, the area called Company Hill, the boardwalk, Magnolia Avenue,
Right.
Tally House, and so the deal was you could live there, but you had to do $50 worth of work on it every month. Was the lease, and so a bunch of people, Jim and Ellen, Natalie Barlow, Ann Bassett, Mary Fry, Merritt Maneth, got the Tally House, and they lived there for a long time. And then at this point where Phelps Dodge decided to divest themselves of their Jerome property, they wanted to get rid of that Company Hill. And in order to do that, they didn't want to subdivide it. They didn't want to have to go through the process, so they wanted to sell it as a single piece. So the group that was there, they formed a nonprofit housing co-op, a corporation called Society Hill Preservation Incorporated, Shippey, and they negotiated a purchase for the entire Company Hill homes.
Now, your current house is part of that,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah, Merritt Maneth was the president of that group for a while, and that was his house. He negotiated. They worked out a deal where they'd all pay a certain percentage of the mortgage, based on their square footage, and the people that came in later had a higher rate, but the original people got the best rate. And they had this whole thing worked out, and they had bylaws, and they had meetings every month, and all, and then we finally.
I can only imagine.
The agreement was, as soon as we got it paid off, we were going to split it up. But then it came to the time to split it up, and it seemed like there was a lot of resistance to that, especially with the people that had the smaller homes that had got in for practically nothing, because we were splitting the bills according to these percentages that we were decided on for the pricing. And so certain people were paying a lot for their insurance, and a lot of people were paying practically nothing for their insurance, and same with a few other bills, the property tax and stuff like that. So there was some incentive and a lot of reluctance to go through this. Plus there was a problem with, it wasn't subdivided, it was one big lot, so we had to figure out how to do that. We met a surveyor in Cottonwood that recommended we do a replat on it because it's historic and the houses are already there. We don't have to go through subdivision and meet all the subdivision requirements. We can do a historic replat. We just take it and we survey it, survey out the lots, give everybody a description, and so I worked. That was something I did. I worked as the chairman of the committee that figured out how to divest ourselves and give everybody their deeds finally. So that was quite a project because there was a lot of personalities involved.
Yes.
Kurt Lindner helped me quite a bit on that. So did Cindy Macy and some of the others. But there was two sides, as in many things. There's
divided
my
up
side
into
and your
camps.
side.
Uh-huh.
Exactly. The resistance and the let's get the deeds, folks. So anyway, that's how those properties became owned by individuals. And mine was bought by Merritt. And Merritt was one of my fire captains at the time.
Merritt Maneth?
Merritt Maneth.
Okay.
He had grown up in Cottonwood. He was a young fellow, and he was gay, and he contracted HIV, and he died. And while he was dying, when he knew the death was coming close, the fire department, I had talked to David Vogel. David Vogel says, Merritt feels like if his house is restored, he will be restored. And painted. He was in the process of painting it. He painted the back side. So we got the fire department up there, and we started painting the house. And we got the primer on, we got it all scraped, primered, but we didn't get it finished. It was all white when he died. It was like this ghost up there.
Oh, wow.
And then we had a little service for him. And his sister and mother, I think, appreciated the fact that we had done that for Merritt. So I think they gave me the inside track when I bid on the thing. They gave me a, because they felt that Merritt would want me and a family to have it. They had a better bid, I think, from another group that wanted to make a bed and breakfast out of it.
Uh-huh.
But we were able to obtain it then. My kids were all still in school, so my youngest son was just barely a toddler at the time. We used to give him baths in the kitchen sink. There's a big old enamel sink in the kitchen. And I've kept that house, and Merritt did too, pretty much historic. We haven't remodeled the thing. It's the original windows, it's the original floor, it's the original walls, it's original ceilings, it's the original outside, everything. It's a very historic house. And it could use this old house rebuild, tear it down to the foundation and do it, because it's probably going to fall down someday, but it has such a nice character to it. There was a Civil War General Minty, that used to run the railroad up here. He was the original resident in it, I guess. And he was a Civil War cavalry general from Ireland. He was an immigrant from Ireland, and he worked his way up during the Civil War to be a general in the cavalry. And he lived in that house at one time.
No kidding.
And Tally lived there, the big cheese. That was the big cheese's house. That was the guy, the chief engineer. After the railroad guy left, then they gave it to the chief engineer, who was like the big boss. He ran the town.
Okay.
He was in charge, basically. The council could say stuff, but the last word was
The mind.
the mine. And they had parties up there. Anyway, it's a very historic house. I think my brother showed me an article one time from the Arizona Republic. It was listed as one of the 10 most historic homes in the state of Arizona.
I'd like to see it sometime.
Yeah,
You'll invite me up.
Yeah, you will, for sure. I have some parties up there once, so it's got a big flat, a lawn out in front. It's got 4 bedrooms upstairs.
And it's yellow, right?
It's yellow,
yeah.
white trim. I've painted it a couple of times now.
Okay.
I don't know if I'll ever do it again. Maybe there's a job for you there.
Yeah.
I tell you, it takes a long time to
I
paint
can
that sucker
imagine.
with a brush.
I'm getting pretty tired of painting the outsides of Jerome
You're getting a
houses
little
on
weary.
the side of a hill, trying to move the ladder around. It's crazy.
I had to rappel out, not rappel, but I had to go on a rope out on the very top little dormer there.
I believe it.
To
I've been
paint
there
it.
a couple of times. Yeah, it's crazy.
So anyway, that's it's a labor of love, but that's it's one of the things I do
Yeah.
is take care of that house. I don't really even feel I own it. It's just like something that I didn't build it. This house, it's a lot bigger than I am. I enjoy
It's
being
pretty
able to
huge.
be in it
Yeah.
and take care of it, but I don't really own it. I got a piece of paper, I can sell it, but
Was
it really belongs to the community in a lot of ways, or to the world,
Yeah.
the universe.
Wasn't it crushed in from the backside at some point, or was that Dave
No.
Vogel's house?
That's the one next to me that's torn down now. They're finally removing all the debris from that thing. That's the flood house. It wasn't named because it was flooded, but it was built right in a wash, and it goes right through the middle of it. And that big storm they had in the 60s, they had a big thunderstorm right around the Labor Day. I remember hearing about it. I was in Page, and we had a big storm up there. But in Jerome, it killed 2 guys that were trying to clean out the flume, and it overflowed, and it ran right through that house next door.
Okay.
All right, let's see. I don't remember what we were talking about, but I did recall a story, a bus story, and we were talking, that Jerome got notoriety in the 80s with the big bust. It was our 15 minutes of fame or whatever. It was a
Yes.
national story on it.
Where the whole town council,
Council and
chief of police.
chief of police. So I was fire chief at the time, and the fire chief did not get busted. So, but I
Just for the record.
I could have gotten busted actually if truths were told. Marijuana was and may in many cases still be a part of the bohemian scene that kind of was created in Jerome, and we all smoked pot and grew it actually later on. But when we got here, we were smoking mostly Mexican and Panamanian, stuff. And but then people started growing it, and one of the guys, a Vietnam veteran and block layer guy, who'd been out in the rice paddies, fighting the war. Will Stone, he came back to Jerome's. If you know the John Prine song, Sandstone. It's not the same, it might be his brother though. But anyway, he was kind of rough around the edges. He'd get into some scrapes in the bars and stuff. And he was sick, and exposure to probably Agent Orange killing him. And he was growing pot. He built a little block house out on Dundee on the right side as you're going down. There's this little mini house. He was a block layer, and he built this house, got arched windows. And he put a fiberglass roof on it and made it into a greenhouse. It was growing marijuana in there, and then he died. But my friend, who was also growing down marijuana and lived nearby, he was watered and kept it going. And apparently somebody saw it, some cops saw it, and so they did a big raid on there. And Will had left him a note. He said, "This is my plan. These are my plans," and expounded maybe a little bit about his attitude towards the government. And I'm dead.
I'm dead. You can't get me.
So that's how Will went out. And our friend that was helping him out, we got real nervous because our friend was right nearby, and he was actually the one that had been tending. And so we got a couple 6-packs and drove down past the DEA into his house and hung out. Nothing ever happened.
Huh. So the fellow that was tending it, he didn't get busted?
No.
Oh, cool.
He's still around. He comes and goes.
Okay.
Anyway, I don't want to name him because it might incriminate,
All right.
even though it's way past
Yeah.
time anybody really care. But, that's part of the culture. Psychedelics, peyote seemed like the drug of choice during the 70s. We used to
Yeah,
just
Ed
eat the
told me
stuff.
about that.
And there was a guy here in town that was actually the big distributor, I think, for the whole Southwest.
Some
We don't
Indian fellow, I think.
Well,
Ed
I think
had mentioned.
there was some connection because the Native American church folks, they're still doing it. I deal with some of those people that I buy some jewelry from, and that's their the Native American church, that's their sacrament.
Yep.
And it is a fine psychedelic, I think. I just haven't seen any of it in years.
Yes,
It's around, I'm sure, but I don't.
I never hear of it anymore.
Yeah,
But
it's not prevalent.
you partook in those days?
Oh, my
No.
first psychedelic experience was peyote tea in Flagstaff, 1969. And we're in a motel room that they're renting out as a college student place, some student's place, and he had this gallon jug of this stuff. And it was nasty, nasty tasting stuff. And we sipped on it for a while and drank some down, and then suddenly everything started dissolving, turning into bubbles, like purple bubbles and green bubbles. And they're all just, it's like, it was one of those, what do they call it? I guess psychedelic experience or whatever, but it was like,
Did you find it to be a spiritual experience?
it felt to me like I could see that the universe and things it's just one thing. It's just, when you dissolve these things, they're all just floating around and interacting. This is an illusion that our nervous system creates, that these things are separate things, that I'm a separate thing. It's all just one thing.
Right.
And so that over my lifetime, I've kind of developed that as my belief system or my thoughts about that type of thing, about the universe and about who I am. But it was kind of an opening to that. I felt that that was kind of what was, I could feel something, my perception had, where I'd been all my life, you know, with this, suddenly there was some other things going on.
So it was pretty prevalent in Jerome?
Well, around the folks I was hanging out with anyway, we
Yeah.
used to do it fairly frequently.
The
We'd
artists
have
and
it.
musicians,
The
I
fellow,
assume.
yeah, the fellow, I guess, that was my good friend, the pot tender guy. He had some quite often. He actually had it growing in his house. A lot of people did. They had a planter, you know, with the buttons in the.
Huh.
They didn't, you know.
Do you feel it had an effect on the character of the town and the way it developed in the early
Oh, I
days?
think for sure that the whole hippie, psychedelic, marijuana, counterculture, bohemian thing, there's something, it kind of runs through Jerome, and it still does, and it's changed so much from 1950s when it was California homosexuals and artists, and now it's still attracting interesting, unusual kind of people.
I agree. With
Retirees
or without
as well
drugs.
as young people.
Yes. Everybody seems to have some kind of similar
Everybody wants.
character.
I like to think of it as artists. We want to be artists. We're not interested in money. We're interested in art. We want our lives to be art. And that's everything we do at some point, you know, becomes art, you know, whether it's fixing the old tally house or making pots or whatever, music,
Painting.
painting.
Yeah.
Everybody in town has some, if they, you know, they may have a day job, but they got an idea
They need
in
an
their
outlet.
head that they would rather be creating art.
Right.
That's unfortunate that they can't see that actually they could create art
Right.
if they just would not need so much, maybe.
Yeah.
Or I mean, it's harder than it was, and that's what's I feel. It makes me sad that it's harder now for the young people to break away. It's like we've become even more tied into this whole corporate consciousness, or just think, you know, the corporations have over my lifetime gained total control of the world as far as I'm concerned. They own it. They tell us what's going on. They, you know.
Yeah, don't get me started.
Well, see, I'm started now, but
Go ahead.
if it's okay,
No,
we can rush
absolutely.
this subject.
Absolutely.
But this is what my thinking is. You know, after being in Jerome and seeing, hey, you know, John and Catherine Matthews were potters and artists here, and I met them, and they said, it doesn't matter how much you make. It doesn't matter for being an artist. What matters is how much you spend. If you live a very frugal life, then you can make art, you know.
Yeah.
And Shorty Powell basically said the same thing, and all these people who were here, that's why they were here, because the rents were $25. They were $10, you know. Shorty's rent was $10, $5 a month for the high house when he
No
moved
kidding.
in there.
Wow.
So anyway, that allowed people to be artists, and it's a shame that people feel. I mean, it's harder. It is harder because we're really, and part of it is we've been brainwashed so much. You know, we don't really understand that, and that's where I think the psychedelics and all kind of had an effect on people, kind of seeing it from a different angle and realizing, hey, this is just a rat race. I have my life, and I'm just part of the universe. And I have this life in this body right now, and I should just try to enjoy that as much as I can and not try to sell my time for money so I can buy a bunch of stuff that's not going to really do it that much. I mean, we need a certain amount for sure, but
Right.
somehow we got to get off this rat race because we're heading off the cliff. And, you know, that's sitting up here on the side of the mountain looking out there. It's kind of scary.
Yeah, we do have a perspective up here, I guess. Being,
Different way of looking at things, maybe.
yeah,
sometimes.
for sure. Well, I always think of, yeah, it's either the artist or alternative lifestyle seeking people that come here, or A lot of people get, I call it washed up on the shores of Jerome. A lot of them will have some sort of traumatic life event or something, and they just sort of
Yeah.
take off and wander, and then they end up here and start to build a new life. But it is curious to me, like you said, I agree with you. It seems like everybody that replants here has some sort of creative itch or some sort of orientation that's different from the rest of the world, and really appreciates being here.
Yeah, it's the old, we're all here because we're not all there.
Yes, exactly.
I think my friend, the tender, actually was the guy that wrote that line the
Oh,
first
no
time.
kidding. Who was it?
Well, I can't tell you because I'm leaving it anonymous.
Oh, okay.
No, actually, it's Craig McLean.
I was wondering the provenance of that.
Craig McLean.
Okay.
If you could ever, if he's ever in town, he lives in Mexico and he comes through town. Last time I saw him, he was.
Oh,
hell-bent.
I know Craig.
You know, Big Craig,
Uh-huh.
Crazy Craig. Yeah, my good buddy Craig. We were really good friends for a long time. We used to play a lot of music together and do all kinds of stuff. He was my best man at my second wedding.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, but he lives in Mexico. Last time I saw him, he was all excited because Moondog said he could play with him on his wash tub, and he was heading for Mexico to get his wash tub. And that was about 2 months ago. I haven't seen him since.
Yeah. Nope. He last time he was here, he popped in over to see Sid and Eric.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's old. He lived out on Dundee, and he was on the fire department with us, you know, at
Okay.
Hostetter Fire, and just one of, you know, he asked me who my friends were. I couldn't think of any, about Dave Moore and Craig McLean and Jim Rome and their wives, you know, Jane, of course, and Shirley,
And Jim's wife.
Marilyn was his wife at the time,
Oh, okay.
his first wife.
Oh,
And
right.
then he got, I don't know whether he and Ellen were ever married or what their
Yeah.
legal status was, but they were together a long time.
I guess I'll find out
Yes, he
next Monday when
just-
I talk to him.
Yeah, you probably get the inside scoop on that one. He is such a great guy.
Yeah, he is.
We
wants-
used to play basketball. We used to have teams. We used to go down and play the city leagues.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, Jim was on those teams, and Michael Higginson, and
No kidding.
me, and
Huh.
Phil Tovey.
You guys held your own?
Sometimes we got pretty tough. We'd have to bring in a ringer though, really, to like get in the upper echelon. So we did that once in a while, bringing a guy from Cottonwood,
Clean up.
big guy. We had a guy, Danny Prock. He played for Grand Canyon College. He was a player, man, and he played guard for them, but he was like 6'3" and 240
That's your
pounds.
guy. Yeah.
So anyway, but we used to play games. They used to have City League games in the Jerome High School gym. That was a beautiful gym. We used to
Yeah.
have pickup games.
It's
down there.
pretty trashed
We
now.
used to have full court pickup games down there twice a week.
No
You'd
kidding.
shoot in first five against the second five. There's more than five, the next guys get in automatically, and you reshoot for
So the
next
place
five.
was just wide open, and
Well, no, we had to get the key. You know,
okay.
Roberto was in charge.
Okay.
That was a high school until 1973 or so. I
Yeah.
think.
Was Don Bassett down there at that time?
He was, yeah. Yeah, I think so. And they made it into a roller rink for a while, too. They tried to make it.
No kidding.
It was a little small, but it was kind of fun. We had a roller rink in Jerome for, I don't know, at least a few months, probably 6 months or so.
That's wild. Well, I had asked you earlier about some most memorable stories, or
Well, I just gave you that one. Well, I
Yeah.
could tell you about, here's another one. One of my firemen, Bobby Bell,
I know Bobby.
Earl Bell's son. According to Earl, he invented the laser, and he owned the Bell properties out there, the
Yes.
Little Daisy.
Uh-huh.
And Bobby decided to have a New Year's at New Year's set off a bunch of fireworks over here on Sunshine Hill. So they had, his slogan was safe and sane. We're going to do this, we're going to be safe and sane.
That doesn't
And the
really
first
sound
one
like
that
Bobby.
the first one that went off landed in the truck with all the rest of them, and the whole thing went off.
Did you attend the party, and were you fire chief at the time?
I was fire chief. I was watching it from my porch. I lived in the apartments down, Glenn Baish's apartments that Tovary family bought, and now I don't know who owns. I think Ron lives there now, the 3-story. Glenn Baish had built that. Glenn Baish was one of my firemen. He was a pot dealer and a grower, and he got busted. And he lived in the house that Mary Wills lived in.
Okay.
And he was from a real straight family in Oklahoma, and he was looking at prison time, and he shot himself in the head.
Oh, man. So when Bobby's fireworks went off, it was kind of a big explosion?
It was a big
Did
show.
it start a fire?
No, it didn't. It was winter. It was wet out. I think it was pretty
Okay.
safe conditions. But yeah, there are a lot of crazy stuff. We used to do the fire department parties in the Little Daisy before it was anything in there. It was just a room because we were doing our parties at that time in August, and it was always rain. And so we had bands. We had rock and roll bands down there, blues bands. We'd cook chickens and had
Yep.
big old town parties down there in the summers. The fire department would sponsor.
I remember that when I first came here, the place was wide open from end to end.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was an interesting building. It still is, I guess.
Yeah, I did some work over there with Walter,
Cool.
some
Yeah.
decorative stuff. Well, I don't know. I'm
I'm running out of energy.
running out
stories.
of questions. Although we didn't get to.
We didn't talk
well-
about the business that much.
Yeah.
And that really is that's my life, is really that made in Jerome pottery, making pottery over this year, and building a business.
And
It's
how long?
last 46 years. We've been in the current building now probably close to 20 years.
Really?
18.
God.
46 years altogether. We were 17 here, 9 there. I don't even do the math, but
Yeah.
yeah, we've been doing it a long time, and I've expanded it. It's no longer. It was originally just our own pottery that we made on site, and then over the years we've expanded our product lines, and including other artists in the area. And we've got
Oh, you fired them too.
well, no, we don't do any there. We only make made in Jerome pottery on site, but we do consign a lot of other artists in
I
the
see.
area. We're almost, people ask if we're a cooperative, and we say no, but we all cooperate.
Do you have one big kiln or a couple kilns?
I
over there now?
have 2 kilns right now. Actually, one's Jane's. It's an electric that someone gave her. It's a real nice little kiln on wheels that we can use for bisque firing. And I have a large gas kiln outside we've had for now probably 15 years. I used
Okay.
to build my own kilns out of smelter brick when we started. So we used to make our own wheels out of stuff we'd pick at the little secondhand stores down in Cottonwood, where the old guys had have all this rusty stuff out in their yards. And we put together some potter's wheels that way, and built our kilns with bricks. I've got a lot of pictures over the years. I don't know, maybe you could incorporate them into some stuff.
Yes, if you want to
because
bring
I
some
got
by.
a bunch of that.
Yeah.
Or
I
I
can
can email them to you.
I can scan them and give them back to you, and then I can
Well, they're scanned.
intersperse
Most
them.
of them are scanned. I don't know if they're
Oh.
enough quality that they'll work for you, but I do have.
Okay, yes, I'd be interested.
Scanned. I can just email them to you.
Okay, cool.
Some of this stuff, the original pottery shop. There's an old shop at the front of that Sullivan building, and it looks like Appalachian. It just doesn't. It just looks like a burnout building practically. My partner Mike's hound dog is stretched out in front of it.
Now, so this is the Sullivan Building?
Yeah, this is a
Yeah,
black
I'd
and
love
white
to see that.
photo
Yeah.
that actually Nancy sent me. Tracy and Nancy.
Oh yeah,
over
yeah.
here.
Cool.
And I got some pictures of that kiln in the pay and take it lot. The sign that says over the lot where the Mexican restaurant is the original lintel. That was a grocery store. It was the Safeway Pay and Take It.
Yeah. You can still see some of that sign
It's
on
still
the
there.
side.
Yeah, they've kept that,
Yeah.
which is I'm glad they have.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's all that was there when we moved in there.
Well, I don't know. Anything else we haven't covered that you think would be worth?
Boy, I don't know. I think we've covered just about everything. You know, I think
Anything?
living in Jerome has been a great life. I haven't anything to compare it to, but sitting on the side of this mountain and seeing all the changes and the seasons come and go, it's been a pleasant experience for the
Yeah.
most part. But there's been, you know, the required pain involved along
Yes.
the way as well. So
Yes, life is definitely suffering, and we just have to find the meaning.
yeah, it's all, you know, that's what my friend Michael says. It's all lessons.
It's all lessons.
Everything is the lesson.
Yeah.
Just got to figure out what the lesson is.
Well, thanks a lot, Dave. I appreciate
Hey,
it.
Michael, I'm
really
glad
do.
you're doing this. I think it's a good thing.
Thank you. Me
Oh.
too. Oops.